My son sent me 4 words, and those 4 words destroyed 38 years of fatherhood. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that a single message from them felt like it stopped your heart? Imagine raising a child, sacrificing everything for him, believing your bond could survive anything, only to wake up one ordinary morning and discover that, to him, you had become someone he no longer wanted in his life. What happened next wasn't just betrayal. It became one of the most shocking acts of deception I'd ever witnessed. And when the truth finally surfaced, the person responsible lost everything they had spent years trying to control. Before we begin, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever wished karma would finally catch up to the people who destroy families, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay until the end. Because today's story proves that lies can win for a while, but truth always keeps the final score. My name is Martin Carter. I'm 67 years old. My hands are rough from 3 decades working in a distribution warehouse. My left knee reminds me every rainy morning that I spent most of my life lifting things heavier than I should have. I have a wonderful wife, a peaceful home, and, at least I believed, a son who loved me. That illusion shattered on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was standing in my kitchen, waiting for the coffee maker to finish brewing. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room while soft sunlight slipped through the window above the sink. Then my phone vibrated. I smiled automatically. Maybe it was my son. Maybe my granddaughter had drawn another picture for Grandpa. Instead, I opened the message. Don't come to our house anymore. We want peace. Nothing else. No explanation. No dad. No please understand. Not even a signature. Just 4 cold words ending with a period that felt like someone slamming a steel door in my face. My fingers suddenly went numb. The warm coffee mug nearly slipped from my hand. My chest tightened so sharply that for one terrifying second, I wondered if I was having a heart attack. I read it again. Then again. Then a 4th time. Each reading somehow hurt even more. This couldn't be real. Not Ethan. Not my little boy. Not the same child who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long Sunday drives. The same boy who once believed I could fix anything simply because I was his father. How does a son go from calling you his hero to telling you never to come back? The front door opened behind me. My wife Margaret walked into the kitchen carrying groceries. She took one look at my face and stopped cold. Martin. Her voice was barely above a whisper. What happened? I couldn't answer. The words refused to leave my throat. Instead, I silently slid my phone across the kitchen counter. She picked it up. As her eyes moved across the screen, I watched the color drain from her face. She read it once. Then again. Finally, she looked at me with tears already forming. No, she whispered. Our Ethan wouldn't say something like this. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her more than anything. But the message was sitting right there on my phone. Cold, permanent, impossible to argue with. Margaret reached for my hand. It was trembling so violently she squeezed it with both of hers. Call him. I nodded. Of course, there had to be some misunderstanding. I pressed Ethan's name. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. Again. Voicemail. By evening. Every call I made went directly to voicemail without ringing at all. He had blocked me. The realization settled over me like ice water. My own son had erased me from his life. People think heartbreak always arrives with screaming, with slammed doors, with ugly arguments. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes heartbreak is nothing more than a phone that never rings. The next morning, I woke up hoping the previous day had been a nightmare. Instead, the first thing I saw was my phone. No missed calls. No apology. No explanation from Ethan. Just silence. The kind of silence that slowly eats away at your sanity. Margaret tried to stay optimistic. Maybe he's overwhelmed with work, she said while stirring her untouched coffee. Maybe his phone is acting up. I wanted to believe her. But deep inside, another voice kept whispering, he blocked you. That afternoon, I called again. Straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail. Again. Nothing. Every failed call felt like another brick being laid between my son and me. By the end of the week, I stopped counting how many times I'd tried. I only counted the disappointments. Being a father changes the way you measure your life. You don't remember promotions. You don't remember the cars you've owned. You remember scraped knees, first baseball games, late-night fevers, the day your little boy learned to ride a bicycle without training wheels. Those are the memories that become your identity. Ethan wasn't just my son, he was the greatest accomplishment of my life. I remembered teaching him to throw a curveball until the streetlights came on. I remembered driving through a snowstorm when his old truck broke down hundreds of miles from home because he refused to call anyone except me. I remembered sitting beside him until 2 in the morning after his first marriage collapsed. He cried like a child. I hugged him like I always had. No broken marriage can break a good man, I told him that night. Those words came from my own father. I'd carried them through life. Now. I wondered if I'd failed somewhere anyway. 6 years earlier, Ethan had married Vanessa. At first, she seemed kind, polite, soft-spoken, the perfect wife. Margaret liked her. So did I. We welcomed her into our family without hesitation. Then came our granddaughter, Lily. She had Ethan's smile, his laugh, his curious little eyes. Every Wednesday I picked her up from school. We'd stop for ice cream even in winter. She'd tell me endless stories about classmates whose names I could never remember. I'd listen to every single word like it was the most important conversation in the world. Then, without warning, those Wednesdays disappeared. 6 weeks had passed since I'd last hugged my granddaughter. That hurt even more than Ethan's message, because somewhere nearby, an 8-year-old little girl might actually believe her grandfather had abandoned her. The thought hollowed me out from the inside. During the 3rd week, I swallowed my pride. I sat at the dining table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. If Ethan wouldn't answer his phone, maybe he'd read a letter. I wrote slowly. Son, if I've hurt you somehow, I'm deeply sorry. Your mother and I love you more than words can explain. Whatever happened, please let us fix it together. Our door will always remain open. I folded the letter carefully. Margaret kissed the envelope before I sealed it. Neither of us knew. That heartfelt letter would never reach Ethan's hands. Someone else would make sure of that. And while we spent night after sleepless night believing our son had rejected us, a patient liar was quietly making sure every bridge between us stayed burned. We simply hadn't discovered who was holding the matches. By the beginning of the 4th week, the silence had become part of our daily routine. Every morning I reached for my phone before I even got out of bed. Every morning it was the same. No calls, no texts, no missed notifications. Just an empty screen that somehow felt louder than any argument. Margaret tried to stay strong for both of us, but grief has a way of leaking through the smallest cracks. I'd find her standing at the kitchen sink, staring out the window with tears quietly rolling down her cheeks. When she noticed me watching, she'd quickly wipe them away. It's just the onions, she'd whisper. There weren't any onions. We both knew that. But after 40 years of marriage, you also learn when pretending is an act of love. One Saturday afternoon, Margaret's younger sister, Carol, stopped by for coffee. She was scrolling through social media while we talked. Suddenly, she froze. What is it? Margaret asked. Carol slowly turned her phone toward us. I don't think you two have seen this. My heart sank before I even looked. There it was. A backyard barbecue. Long wooden tables covered with food. Colorful balloons. Family laughing together beneath glowing string lights. Standing in the middle was Ethan. Beside him, Vanessa, little Lily, ran across the yard with a huge smile on her face. Surrounding them were Vanessa's parents, her brothers, her sisters, cousins. Everyone. Everyone. Except us. Margaret stared at the picture without blinking. They had a family gathering, she whispered. And we weren't even invited. I searched desperately for an explanation. Maybe it was planned at the last minute. Carol shook her head. Martin, look closer. Decorations, custom banners, matching shirts, a professionally decorated cake. This wasn't spontaneous. It had taken weeks to organize. Weeks which meant invitations had gone out, phone calls had been made, plans had been discussed, and somehow neither Ethan nor anyone else had contacted us. That realization hurt more than the message itself. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger looking through the window of my own family. A few days later, desperation pushed me somewhere I'd never imagined going. I drove past Lily's elementary school. I parked across the street. I wasn't there to cause trouble. I wasn't even planning to get out of my truck. I just wanted one glimpse of my granddaughter. The final school bell rang. Children poured through the front doors laughing and shouting. Then I saw her. Tiny backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Pink sneakers. The same ponytail Margaret always braided whenever Lily stayed the night. She laughed with her friends, completely unaware that her grandfather was only 30 yards away, too afraid to wave, too afraid she'd been told not to recognize me. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. When her school bus disappeared around the corner, I broke. I lowered my head onto the steering wheel and cried harder than I had since burying my own father. That weekend, my oldest friend, Daniel Brooks, showed up unannounced with 2 cups of coffee. He studied my face for a long moment. "You've lost weight," he said quietly. "I've lost my son." Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward. "Martin, answer me honestly. In 38 years, has Ethan ever gone 6 weeks without speaking to you?" I searched every memory I had, every disagreement, every misunderstanding, every difficult season. Finally, I shook my head. Not once. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Then stop asking why your son went silent." He paused, letting the words settle between us. "And start asking who benefits from keeping him silent." For the first time, in 6 agonizing weeks, a thought I had refused to consider crept into my mind. What if Ethan hadn't abandoned us? What if someone wanted us to believe he had? Daniel's words refused to leave my mind. "Don't ask why your son went silent. Ask who benefits from his silence." For the first time in 6 weeks, my grief was joined by something else. Suspicion. Not wild suspicion. The quiet kind. The kind that keeps an old man awake at 3 a.m, replaying years of conversations, searching for moments that never felt important until now. Lying beside Margaret that night, I stared at the ceiling. Suddenly, memories I dismissed as coincidence began lining up like pieces of a puzzle. Lily's 4th birthday. We'd been told the party date had changed. By the time we found out the real date, it was already over. Christmas 2 years earlier, Vanessa had called to say Lily was sick with the flu, and they couldn't make it. A week later, Carol accidentally showed us photos online. They hadn't stayed home. They had celebrated Christmas with Vanessa's family 3 hours away. No flu. No fever. Just another excuse. Back then, we'd accepted every explanation. Because that's what families do. They trust each other. Looking back now, those weren't isolated disappointments. They were a pattern. And patterns don't build themselves. The next afternoon, Carol called. Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Martin, I saw Vanessa at the grocery store." "Oh?" She avoided me. Maybe she was in a hurry. "No." Carol hesitated. She looked nervous. "What happened?" I asked how everyone was doing. "And?" Carol took a slow breath. She smiled and said, "We're finally enjoying some peace without all the family drama." I sat frozen. "What drama?" "Exactly." Carol's voice hardened. "Martin, nobody has told me about any drama. There wasn't any." "I know." Silence settled between us. Then she spoke again. "I think somebody is telling different stories to different people." Those words sent a chill through my entire body. Different stories, different versions, different truths. Suddenly, nothing felt impossible anymore. That evening, Daniel came over again. He listened without interrupting as I told him everything Carol had said. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "I've seen controlling people before." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They isolate first. They convince you everyone else is the problem. They slowly become the only voice you trust." He looked directly into my eyes. If someone wanted to separate Ethan from his parents, they wouldn't do it with one big lie. They'd do it with 1,000 tiny ones. The sentence hit me like lightning. 1,000 tiny lies. One missed birthday. One canceled visit. One unanswered phone call. One misunderstood text. One family dinner we supposedly forgot. Individually. Harmless. Together. Enough to destroy an entire family. 5 days later, everything changed. It was barely 6 a.m. The sky outside was still gray. Margaret was pouring coffee while I stood quietly by the kitchen window. Then, knock, knock, knock. Not the doorbell. A hurried knock. Uneven. Desperate. Margaret looked at me. I looked back at her. Neither of us spoke. But somehow, we both knew. I walked slowly toward the front door. My hand rested on the handle. For one brief second, I was afraid. Afraid of what waited on the other side. Afraid it would make everything worse. I opened the door. There stood Ethan. His clothes looked as though he'd dressed in the dark. His eyes were bloodshot. His face was pale. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. The confident son I knew was gone. Instead, a broken father stood on my porch. He stared at me for several long seconds before his lips finally moved. "Dad." His voice cracked. Then tears spilled down his face. "I didn't send that message. I swear on Lily's life I never sent that message." The world seemed to stop. Every angry thought, every sleepless night, every painful assumption collapsed in a single heartbeat. If Ethan hadn't sent the message, then someone else had. And whoever that person was had spent 6 weeks watching our family tear itself apart. I stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come inside, son." My voice trembled. "Start from the beginning." Neither of us realized it then, but before the morning was over, we would uncover a betrayal far more calculated than either of us could have imagined. Ethan sat at our kitchen table without saying a word. The same table where he'd colored dinosaurs as a little boy. The same table where he'd studied for college exams. The same table where I'd comforted him after his first divorce. Now he looked like a stranger carrying the weight of an entire lifetime. Margaret quietly placed a cup of coffee in front of him. He didn't touch it. Instead, he buried his face in his trembling hands. "Dad, I found something 2 nights ago." His voice sounded hollow. "I was cleaning up old files on my laptop. I found an old backup from my phone." He swallowed hard. "It showed 15 missed calls from you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "You never answered. I never even knew they existed." The room went silent. I checked my actual phone. There weren't any missed calls. I checked the backup again. They were all there. 15 calls, every one from you. My heart began pounding. "That's impossible." I thought so too. Ethan nodded slowly. "Until I started digging." He looked directly into my eyes. "Vanessa set up my phone almost a year ago." I blinked. She said she was organizing my work calls. She claimed clients kept interrupting family time. So I let her manage everything. His voice filled with disgust. "She secretly redirected certain calls, blocked others, and made sure I never saw yours." Margaret covered her mouth. "No," Ethan nodded. "Every time you called, I believed you never cared enough to reach out. And every time you stayed silent, you believed I'd abandoned you." Someone had built 2 completely different realities, one for us, one for Ethan. Neither of them was true. Then Ethan reached into his backpack. He placed his phone on the table. "There's more." He opened his messages. "Dad, have you ever sent me texts criticizing how we raised Lily?" I stared at the screen. "I've never written anything like that." He showed us screenshot after screenshot. Messages supposedly from my number. Messages accusing Vanessa of being controlling. Messages claiming Margaret wanted to make parenting decisions. Messages demanding more access to Lily. Every one of them ended with my name. Except, none of them were mine. "They're fake." I whispered. "They have to be." "I know that now," Ethan replied. "But for years, I believed every word." Margaret's shoulders shook as tears streamed down her face. "I would never try to turn you against your wife." "I know," he answered softly. "But someone convinced me you already had." Within an hour I called my nephew, Noah Carter. Noah worked in digital forensics. If anyone could uncover the truth, it was him. He arrived carrying a laptop and 2 external drives. The moment he heard the story, his expression changed. "Don't explain anything," he said calmly. "Just give me every device you have." For nearly 40 minutes, no one spoke. The only sounds in the room were keyboard clicks and the faint hum of Noah's computer. Finally, he leaned back. His face had gone pale. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Noah turned the laptop toward us. "I'm looking at the original metadata. The screenshots are fake. The conversations never happened." He clicked another file. "There are deleted message threads." Another click. A contact labeled Dad was secretly configured to auto-silence incoming calls. Another. Call forwarding logs. Then he looked directly at Ethan. This wasn't one mistake. This was planned. For a very long time. The room felt colder. Margaret squeezed my hand until it hurt. I barely noticed. Noah wasn't finished. There are recovered notes, forged medical excuses, deleted conversations, and, he hesitated, a hidden folder. Ethan leaned forward. What's inside? Noah's jaw tightened. I think. You're about to discover that your marriage wasn't built on trust. It was built on a carefully designed illusion. At that moment, every person in that kitchen knew the truth was finally within reach. None of us were prepared for how monstrous it would actually be. Noah stared at the laptop screen for several long seconds. Nobody dared to speak. The silence itself felt dangerous. Finally, he took a slow breath. I found a hidden backup folder. Ethan leaned forward. What's in it? Noah clicked the folder open. Hundreds of files appeared. Screenshots, deleted conversations, phone logs, scanned documents, everything organized into neat folders by month and year. It looked less like family memories, and more like evidence collected by someone preparing for war. This, Noah whispered, didn't happen overnight. He opened the first folder. Dozens of fake text conversations. Messages supposedly exchanged between me and Ethan. Except every one of them had been created as edited screenshots. The fonts matched. The colors matched. But the metadata told another story. They're fabricated, Noah said quietly. The original message database contains nothing like these. Ethan's face lost all color. So, for 4 years, I've been arguing with conversations that never existed. Noah nodded. I'm afraid so. Margaret covered her mouth to stop herself from sobbing. I couldn't even blink. Every birthday we'd missed, every holiday, every awkward silence, every unanswered call. Someone had engineered all of it, one deliberate lie at a time. Then Noah opened another folder. This one is worse. Inside were scanned doctor's notes claiming Lily had stomach viruses, ear infections, high fevers, reasons she supposedly couldn't visit us. Margaret frowned. I remember every one of those. Noah opened Lily's actual medical records. The dates didn't match. There were no appointments, no diagnoses, no illnesses. They're fake. Ethan stared at the screen. She forged medical excuses to keep my daughter away from her grandparents. Nobody answered. Nobody could. Then Noah found something that froze the room. A deleted group chat between Vanessa and her younger sister. He slowly began reading. Told Ethan his parents criticized our parenting. He believed every word. Another message. Blocked his mother's number today. One less problem. Another. If I keep this up, it'll just be the three of us. No outside influence. Our perfect little family. The room became so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Ethan's hands began shaking uncontrollably. He whispered the words again. Our perfect little family. So that was the plan. No grandparents. No aunts, no uncles, no one except her. Daniel, who had arrived earlier after my phone call, finally broke the silence. Son, that's not love. He looked Ethan straight in the eyes. That's a prison disguised as a marriage. That evening, Ethan asked all of us to come with him. We're ending this tonight. When Vanessa walked through the front door, she stopped instantly. Her smile disappeared. On the coffee table lay 2 phones, a laptop, printed call logs, recovered messages, and years of evidence. She looked from one face to another, trying to calculate, trying to recover, trying to invent another story, Ethan. She forced a nervous smile. What's going on? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam the table. He simply held up one printed screenshot. You tell me. Her eyes flickered. He placed another document beside it, then another. Call forwarding records, fake conversations, forged medical notes, the hidden group chat, every lie, stacked neatly in front of her. Her confidence crumbled. I only wanted peace. Margaret stood slowly. Her voice trembled not with fear, but with heartbreak. Peace? For 6 weeks I believed my own son hated me. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I questioned every memory I'd ever shared with him. She stepped closer. You designed that pain. Vanessa looked toward Ethan. I did it for us. I wanted our family together. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Our family? He shook his head. You didn't build a family. You isolated one. You stole birthdays. You stole Christmas. You stole my parents. And you stole years from my daughter that she'll never get back. For the first time, Vanessa had no answer. No excuse. No performance. Just silence. The very weapon she'd used against us had finally become her own punishment. Then Ethan spoke the words that ended everything. Pack your things. You won't spend another night in this house. Vanessa's shoulders collapsed. She realized, not only had every lie been exposed, she had finally lost the only thing she had spent years trying to control. People often ask me what revenge feels like. They imagine shouting, public humiliation, some dramatic moment where everyone claps, and the villain walks away defeated. But after living through everything our family endured, I've learned something different. Real revenge isn't watching someone suffer. It's watching them lose the very life they destroyed yours to build. The weeks after Vanessa left weren't easy. Movies make healing look quick. Real life doesn't. There were lawyers, court hearings, stacks of documents, hours of testimony. Every recovered text, every forged screenshot, every call log Noah had uncovered became part of the evidence. Vanessa's attorney tried to describe it as a misunderstanding, a family communication breakdown. Ethan's lawyer didn't even flinch. She calmly placed the evidence before the judge. Your Honor, she said, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is a documented pattern of deception spanning several years. She presented the fake screenshots, the manipulated call records, the forged medical excuses, the hidden messages to Vanessa's sister describing exactly how she planned to isolate Ethan from everyone he loved. The courtroom became silent. Even Vanessa couldn't look at the evidence, because for the first time, her lies were speaking louder than she ever could. When the judge finally spoke, her words were calm, measured, unforgettable. A mistake happens once. She looked directly at Vanessa. What you've done required planning, preparation, repeated decisions. This court cannot ignore years of intentional manipulation designed to separate a child from loving family members. Those words changed everything. The judge ordered that all future visitation with Lily would be closely supervised while custody arrangements were reviewed. Vanessa wasn't the victim anymore. She was facing the consequences of every decision she'd made. The prison she'd built for everyone else had quietly become her own. Several months later, I saw Vanessa one final time at a neighborhood pharmacy. She looked older, not because of time, because consequences have a way of aging people faster than birthdays ever do. She noticed me immediately. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she asked quietly, "How's Lily?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "She's happy. She spends weekends with us now. We talk every week. No blocked calls. No fake messages. No walls between us." She lowered her eyes. "I never meant," I gently interrupted. "Vanessa, nobody accidentally forges years of conversations. Nobody accidentally isolates a little girl from people who love her. You made those choices. Now you're living with them." I walked away before she could answer, not because I hated her, because I had finally reached something far more valuable. Peace, real peace. The kind built on truth, not control. The first time Lily came back to our house, she ran through the front door so fast that I barely had time to kneel before she threw her arms around my neck. "Grandpa." She hugged me with every ounce of strength an 8-year-old could manage. Then she looked into my eyes. "Why didn't you come see me?" The question nearly broke me. I smiled through tears. "I wanted to every single day, sweetheart. There were grown-up problems. But they're over now. I'm never choosing to stay away from you again." She held out her little pinky finger. "Promise?" I hooked mine around hers. "I promise." That tiny pinky promise meant more than every legal victory we'd won. Because at that moment, our family truly began healing. Ethan visited almost every weekend after that. Sometimes we'd fix things in the garage. Sometimes we'd watch baseball. Sometimes we'd simply sit together on the back porch without saying much at all. Words weren't always necessary anymore. Presence was enough. One afternoon he looked at me quietly. "Dad, I almost spent the rest of my life believing you stopped loving me." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "And I almost believed you stopped loving us." He nodded. "Thank God Lily asked that one question." I smiled. Sometimes the smallest voice tells the biggest truth. A year later, we celebrated Lily's 9th birthday in our backyard. Daniel was there. Carol brought homemade pie. Noah laughed as Lily begged him to teach her about computers someday. Margaret sat beside me watching Ethan chase Lily across the grass. The sound of their laughter filled the yard. She leaned her head against my shoulder. We almost lost all of this. I looked at my son, my granddaughter, the family that had survived years of carefully planted lies. No, I whispered. We almost believed a lie. But love was stronger. As the sun disappeared beyond the trees, I realized something. Justice hadn't arrived through anger. It arrived through truth. The greatest revenge wasn't destroying Vanessa. It was rebuilding the family she tried so hard to erase. And that was something she could never take away again. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable revenge stories, where patience, truth, and karma always have the final word. And tell us in the comments, what do you think was Vanessa's biggest mistake, and do you believe some betrayals should never be forgiven? Until next time, remember this: lies can separate people for a season, but the truth has a way of bringing the right hearts back together. And when karma finally arrives, it never gets the wrong address.